Today's guest, Andy Kaufman, is a recognized expert on leadership and project management, helping organizations around the world improve their ability to lead and deliver. He works with leaders at organizations such as the United Nations, World Health Organization, NASA, and other global clients to improve their ability to deliver on their initiatives. Before becoming an internationally sought-after speaker, Andy started as a software developer and was promoted into management for all the wrong reasons. He started his small business in 2001, 2 weeks before 9/11, which provided all kinds of lessons about how to scale a business during difficult times. He's the author of 3 books and the host of the acclaimed People and Projects podcast, which provides interviews and insights about leading and directing for his global listeners. Please welcome to the show, Andy Kaufman. How are you?
Oh, Joe, I've been looking forward to this ever since we started talking about it. So thank you.
I know. I'm so excited. Like, we were talking earlier and I'm like, this is the kind of stuff that I like to geek out on and like talk about for hours. So I'm going to reel it in. Keep it focused. Yep, for sure. Let's start off, which I think is, the biggest question that all of our listeners really need nowadays, because we've all got so much stuff coming at us. There's so many things to do. And of course, we as entrepreneurs, we want to do all the things. But how can a business owner use leadership and project management to improve their ability to operate their business?
Well, it's actually a really good question. And in some ways, it just seems like obvious. Like, well, of course you have to have leadership, or of course you have to have project management. But, it's not that, common sense isn't always, done commonly. And it's one of those things where I think a common problem I've seen as I grew my business is self-leadership. Like, I would just try to do it all myself. And so a big message out of your podcast is, how do we scale? And so part of leadership is surrounding ourselves with people. So it's not just the small business owner with the cape flying in to save the day, doing all the sales, putting everything in boxes. And so a lot of leadership comes down to empowerment. And so you can't operate your business for very long just being on your own, right? So using leadership ideas, and there's plenty of episodes we could talk about, just on that. But project management is ultimately, how do we get stuff done? And small business owners who just talk about things but don't deliver are called small business owners. Right?
Totally agree.
Yeah. And so, you could probably think Jill, of just recently of things you're trying to deliver, right? So project managers, how do we deliver stuff? How do we go from, this is a good idea, oh, I've got 50,000 good ideas. How do I figure out which are the most important ones, and how do I deliver? That's what project management ultimately is.
It's so funny that you said that, because that's me. My team is like, okay, let's write it down. Let's reel it in. Let's save that, but let's refocus here and make sure that we're delivering on what we're working on right now. And I think too, that's probably a common thing for a lot of small business owners. But what are the most specific areas of business that you think projects can be created around?
Well, I like to think of this one as, where in your business, so people listening to us, where in your business do you have due dates? Okay, because if you have got a due date, it's probably a project. So, there's all kinds of formal definitions of what project management is or what a project is. But really, if it takes multiple steps to get there and there's a due date, it's probably a project. So I think some easy things to think about would be, if a business owner is trying to come up with new product offerings, that's very easy. But some that are sometimes more subtle is onboarding more efficiently. That's a project. That's an internal project. How do we get more efficient with how we run our accounting systems and our other operations? A core to project management is understanding of stakeholders. Who is being impacted by these things? So, a lot of times we think of project management as for those who have a title, project manager. But the truth is, Jill, you and I, we're all project managers, right? We all have to deliver stuff. So really, any part of the business where you've got deliverables and due dates.
And I like that you mentioned that it could be something as simple, which is not simple, PS everybody, as onboarding, because it's one of those things where we just think about like this big project that we're working on, like redoing our website or, something like that. But really, every aspect of our business can use those steps that we need. Right. What do you think is the best way that you've found to document, maintain, manage those projects in our businesses? Is there any specific software that you use? I know that we use one. Which one do you use?
Well, first of all, let's hear what you use. What
Well,
do
we
you,
love Asana.
I use Asana. Exactly. So
Yeah, I love
Asana's
it.
my favorite one. And, but we found this. So, like I'll work with organizations as big as the UN and as small as some startups, or like we did a project management session for like a group of 15, a company of 15. And whether you're as big as the UN or a small company, we have found, let's see, what's the phrase? A fool with a tool is still a fool. So the
I
tool,
love that.
because you could bring in any sort of scale your business tool, and the fact is, if you don't know how to use it, it's not going to help. So one of the things that we found is that there's some documentation up front that can help. You don't have to overly document, but making sure it's really clear of if somebody's going to run a project internally, even if it's a one-pager, why are we doing this? Because somebody on our team isn't going to understand the why. So why are we going to do this? And even if it's just the why and the what, and with the what, it's what's in scope and what's out of scope. Because a lot of times what happens is a business owner will say to someone on their team, like, yeah, let's do this. And the person's like, oh, that's too big. But maybe they're not really thinking all that. So what's in and what's out. Sometimes just little things about that. What's in scope and what's out of scope. And then there's this idea that's super practical. And that is, if you are going to maintain a project, whether you use Asana or any other tool, get some sort of, we like to call them stakes in the ground. Some sort of stakes in the ground of, okay, so, what is like, we're roughly mid-month of the month when you and I are recording this, but what is the stake around for the end of the month, the middle of the next month, the end of the next month? And so it's like a checkpoint at mid-month and end of month, at least that. There's some evidence to suggest if it's more than 2 weeks, people will tend to drift. But even if we just do this, Jill, and I'd be interested in kind of what you've learned about this as well, about how dividing things down. But we've just found if you keep assignments 5 to 10 business days or 2 weeks or less, have a why and the what's in, what's not in, that's a great place to start.
No, I think that's awesome because even though we have these goals defined, further out, it's like we know that they're there. It's a safe place to keep them, but we've got to reel that in and focus on what is coming up right away, like you said, because if we're so focused on things that are so far out, the things that we need to do right now are going to fall through the cracks.
So true. Like if you said to your team member, Holly, you said, hey, Holly, just get this done whenever. There's no rush. When is she going to get it done?
Right.
Never.
When does she know when I want it to be done,
Yeah. So constraints. And I found that I interviewed a guy who wrote a book called The Procrastination Formula. I think it was the Procrastination Equation was the name of the book. And he boils procrastination down to a formula, which is kind of interesting, but he just shows that if you give somebody a month, they probably won't touch it the first 2 weeks. And then there's like the big panic at the end. If you give people a week, Monday and Tuesday, they won't do much. But Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they will. And so if you keep it in the 2 weeks or less, it's just enough cognitive urgency that they'll be like, okay, Jill's going to ask me about this. So I better be working on it. So just keeping it just close enough. You give somebody a deadline 3 months out, forget about it. They're not going to touch it for at least the first month and a half.
Well, and I don't know if you were like this in college, but for me, definitely that was okay, we got the syllabus, Absolutely. Everything's lined out, but it's like you wait until it gets closer because you're like, oh, I don't need to worry about that right now. I don't need to deal with that right now. And I think what's so cool about what you have done with your company is you've actually created something specific for students to kind of get them on this path of, hey, let's get these good habits started early so that maybe if you do become a business owner or just in your regular life, you can be more organized and get things done more efficiently. So let's talk about that really quick, because I feel like this is the perfect opportunity to discuss that.
Well, I appreciate you asking about that because I know there's not a single high schooler in the world who's Googling right now, project management for students. so
Totally.
Right. But the thing is, I just know as a business owner myself, my friends who are business owners, like we have an appreciation for theory, but we have a strong desire for practical, like what's going to work to grow my business. And if you get close enough to what high school curriculum often is, it's like, it's a lot of theory and not necessarily how do you get stuff done. And so we took what we teach to the UN and NASA and World Health Organization and all kinds of companies around the world, different industries, and say, how can we package it in a way that a high schooler could go through this, or undergrad, and say, this can actually help me through my schooling. Like, I can have less stress because I'm not doing, like you said, that cram, I can thrive while I'm going through my school, but it helps me hit the ground running in my career. And so what we find is we don't actually reach out to students directly. We reach out to their parents. And like, if you want to set your kid up for success for the rest of their schooling and to get them prepared to deliver stuff in the real world, it's because the world beats a path to people who get things done, Jill, and you know this, not the people who talk about it, but that get stuff done. And so it's a product that helps set them up for success.
So true. And I think too, that is a good way to look at it when we're talking about growth, right? All of us as small business owners, we want to grow, we want to do more, we want to be able to help more people. And so what are these things that small business owners can like create projects to help their businesses grow?
Yeah. Well, I've had to learn this over the course of the 21 years I've been in business. Is ultimately, it doesn't matter if I think it's a good idea. Do customers think it's a good idea, right? And so the place to often start with projects is pain points. And just think, so, all right, where is it that people are dissatisfied? It's difficult to get people to change or to take action if there's not some dissatisfaction with it. Right? And so where is it that there's pain? And I was taught early in my business is find out what kind of problems you like to solve and go after those. Because, in fact, I was talking to somebody who's just about ready to graduate from college. She goes, I don't know what to do. But I was offered this, I think it was a data entry job. And she goes, I would lose my hair. That's not the kind of problem she likes to solve. So for all of us, like, what are the kind of problems that we solve as a business? And you probably already figured that out if you're in a business. And what are the pain points for those people? And what can we do to make that pain go away? I was taught, what's the phrase? Money exchanges hands when you deliver value. Okay. And so how can we deliver value against those pain points? And so there's an idea in project management, just one quick idea called minimum viable product. A lot of business owners are going to be familiar with this idea, the MVP. What's the minimum we could deliver that would be of value? Let's get that out in the market and just see, can it help people? So what's the least we can do that adds value? Get it out there. So we're not like work, deliver and find out that's not really helping them. Good project management. Work, deliver. What's the minimum we can deliver? Get that out there or internally in our organization and then see how it works. Maybe you can think of some examples, Joe, you guys have done internally of, well, we could do the all singing, all dancing, or let's do this one and see how that works and then iterate on that.
For sure. I mean, that focus, well, for anything, when you focus in on anything, it's like, then it gets done and then it just kind of snowballs and you move on to the next thing. And kind of the biggest thing that I learned in my business is gathering employees that kind of get the same, what's the word? Not buy-in. That's not the right word.
Maybe
they're excited about it.
Or passions, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Because when someone's passionate about working on a project, and this is something that we've done in our business, and for anyone listening, I encourage you to do this because you will be shocked at the answers that you get. But I asked each of my employees, even though they're, they have their positions, they're working on certain things. Yeah. I randomly sent them a message one day and was like, what's your favorite part of your job? What do you wish that you were doing? And the responses that I got back from them, I was just like, some of these people are in the wrong spot. They need to be in a different spot. And I think that is so huge in finding out where people, what they're passionate about, what they're excited about, because that comes back into those projects that we give them. When they're passionate about it, they get done faster. They're more excited about it. The end product is better. But what is your advice when we're creating those projects within our business? How do we help delegate that workload with employees? What are some things that you found with your team that have really helped you?
Yeah. So if we could actually have the audience all together in a room, and if you and I asked, like, how many of you have trust issues?
Totally.
Right. I don't like to admit that I have micromanaging tendencies, but I think sometimes as the small business owner, we care. Right? That's why we started the business.
It's our baby.
It's our baby. Right. Exactly. And the truth is, we probably could do it faster than delegated. and it get done right, because at least it's our definition of right anyway. But here's part of my scaling story. Is I was having lunch with a guy who, not really a mentor, but a colleague, somebody I didn't know great, but I respect him on LinkedIn. And we're talking about the business. He goes, Andy, I just got to tell you this. I think your strategy is arrogant and selfish. I'm like, oh. And I was buying lunch.
Okay.
I was buying lunch, Jill, too. But anyway, I'm like, tell me what you mean. He goes, you think you're the only one who can deliver your material. I'm like, no, I don't. He goes, how many people deliver your material? Pretty much me. Because you're being selfish. You're being selfish. There are other people who do it. So, Jill, here's what I did. I added facilitators to the team. And the interesting thing is some of them teach some of the material so much better or differently that I've learned from them. And so for those of us who run businesses who think that we can just do it better and do it faster, and there may be plenty of truth to that, if we can just get a little bit, just give clear direction, but just let them get, a little bit more. Like I interviewed the author of a book called Unleashed. How can I let the leash out a little bit more? She's a Harvard professor. It's a great book, Frances Fry. How do we unleash the people around us? And we sometimes just hold on that leash too much. So from a project perspective, here's what we're thinking. Here's what I'm thinking. I really want your input on this. Tap into their passion. There's a guy named Murnion. Keith Murnion wrote a book called Do Nothing. And the premise of the title is, the higher you get up in an organization, the more it should be perceived you're doing nothing. And that's not true, not doing nothing, but nothing in the day-to-day. You're looking further down the road. And imagine if we said, here's a project. Here's what we're trying to do. Now, I'm gonna extend some trust here. I'll check in with you. If you need something from me, let me know. But I'm going to trust you to take, this is your baby. I like you use that term. This is my baby. It's now your baby. Let's deliver this thing together. Get them excited and just let the leash out a little bit. It's so hard for me to do, Jill. I don't know. Is this something you struggle as you were going into your business?
Oh my gosh, all the time. And, it was an accident that really changed my life, because I got a concussion and I couldn't work. And so I really had to lean on my team. And that was when I realized, holy smokes, why am I doing everything? They can do it so much better than me. And I think that hopefully business owners are able to realize that before a health event changes their life and they are forced to make these changes. But that's something that I talk about all the time, because there's so many amazing people that we as entrepreneurs kind of micromanage them, let's be honest. And it's like, if you give your people the freedom, it's incredible what they can do. So incredible.
So, but here's something Murnion says. He says, trust people more than they've earned. So that doesn't mean if they've earned a 2, let's say, give them a 10. Like, I don't go to my 11-year-old son and go, here's the keys to my car. Like, that would be stupid. But if they've earned a 2, give them a 3 or 4. If they've earned a 4, give them a 5 or 6. Just a little bit more trust. People, his point is, people can surprise us. That's how they learn. You can read books about swimming. You can watch YouTube. But you got to get in the pool, right? So give them the opportunity to get in the pool, so to speak.
I love that. It's so true. And I would have never thought that, because like you mentioned, I was the person that was like, I can do it better. It's just faster if I do it. And just having people step up to the plate when I couldn't, it was just now it's completely different perspective, completely different. When I hire a new team member, we kind of go down in the rundown of what, just what you said of hey, what's your passion? What do you love doing? Does that make sense in our organization? Because we want people to work here that are passionate, because then they're going to be passionate about what we're doing. And if we have a small business owner that's listening to us and they know that they're a little scattered, they've got stuff all over the place, they need a place to keep it all, they want to set up a project because they know that that's what they need to succeed, where should they even start? What's level 1 for people that are I got to get it under control, but I don't know how?
That idea of the stakes in the ground is a good place to start. And so you just chunk the work down a little bit. Because I find that, well, actually, there's some evidence on this called the planning fallacy that says the further out a deadline is, the more optimistic we are. Right? So if you pick a deadline, 6 months out, 12 months out, you'd be like, okay. But if it's by the end of the week, are you nuts? So by breaking the work down, it almost always gives us more clarity. And so that idea of the stakes in the ground, and just by putting the stakes in the ground doesn't mean we'll hit it, but in a sense, it's a little bit like, I don't know, Jill, does your car have that drive, keep
lane assist. Yeah.
Yeah, lane assist. Yeah. Yeah. So the first time I drove one of these cars, I didn't know it was equipped, and I thought the car had a problem. As it turns out, I'm a lousy driver apparently. But we need kind of like that lane assist on our projects. And so don't just tell somebody or tell ourselves, hey, this is what we're going to do. Get the stakes in the ground, have the lane assist. And then if we're off track, there's a guy by the name of Fred Brooks who said, how's a project get a year behind? His answer, one day at a time. One day. How do we get behind on our revenue projections? One day at a time. You know, how do we scale our business? One day at a time. And so this idea of one day at a time, I think, is a brilliant reminder that, listen, one day at a time, let's just we're going to make progress. We're going to make progress. So starting with that, in addition to what I talked about of what's in and what's out and the stakes in the ground, I have found there's value in documenting assumptions early on in the project. Say, all right, we're going to do this project based on these assumptions. We assume that over 50% of our existing clients will upsell to this. We assume that we can get pricing like this. If you document the assumptions early on, and this comes from decision-making theory, that if we go document the assumptions, and then later on we can say, well, how'd they turn out? And we'll get some of them, we'll miss on some of them, but by documenting the assumptions, then we can go back and go, maybe we're overly optimistic, and moderate our assumptions next time around. So those would be some examples.
You know, it makes me think when you were talking about the lane assist, it makes me think of like when you go bowling and you've got those bumpers, so your bowling ball never goes in the gutter. Right. It just like that image popped up into my head, and I was like, it's like bowling, but with the bumpers.
It is. Yeah, that's right. And too many times, that's such a brilliant observation. Too many times we don't put the bumpers up, and it would be the equivalent of how I golfed, and I'm on 3 fairways away because I was maybe, swinging for the fences, so to speak, instead of just, hey, just make progress. Just get further down on this fairway,
Well, and you talk about making progress. I know at least for us, that anytime we use a new software, or even though the software is not new to us, there are some struggles and some hiccups that we run into. What do you think is the best way for people to stay on track? Because sometimes the drift is natural, but how do we kind of maintain focus and keep us back where we need to be, so that way projects actually get done?
Yeah. In addition to those stakes in the ground, something I've learned is, actually, let me give you an example of that stakes in the ground idea, because I was hired to create a facilitation skills class for a company, and I had left to my own devices. I would have done that, procrastinate and cram, like you talked about with students, but we had a weekly check-in, and it was tended to be on Thursdays. It was with my main contact. Guess how the work went? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. As I got closer to Thursday, the work picked up. And so, and then on Friday and Saturday, I wouldn't think about the next Thursday, the work picked up. So it had the benefit of keeping me on track. And by doing this, and this helps in so many different ways, because when you use the term our baby, like our project becomes our baby. We love our baby. And if we don't have these checkpoints with customers, all of a sudden we deliver and they're like, your baby's ugly. That's not what we wanted.
Yeah.
So having regular check-ins, so not even just deadlines, but having regular check-ins with our customers, like, hey, we're not done yet, but that thing we've been talking about, here's kind of a little peek. What do you think? Is this kind of along the lines of what you're thinking? And by having those regular kind of checkpoints, we know whether we're on track or not. So it has the benefit of keeping us accountable, but also an opportunity to kind of get some feedback. And then if we're off track, then we know it earlier, and then we can make some adjustments.
And if people have been listening to this podcast and they're like, this is what I need help with this. I need some project management. I got to get this whole situation figured out. Where can people connect with you to find out more about your process?
Yeah, probably the easiest place to connect would be on LinkedIn, just because pretty active on LinkedIn. I've maxed out my connections. And so if somebody follows me, I try to make sure I have actually a team member that makes sure we try to follow back. But we have almost daily conversations on topics related to leadership and project management. And it's often a quote and then wrestling with that idea. So it's a very interactive sort of thing. So that would be a great place. And in addition to that product for students, we have webinars and learning that's related to project management. So if somebody really wants to get to know that, they can check out links on your site for that.
And if somebody wants to get, let's say, like you mentioned, you were talking about, hey, we have those weekly check-ins. Where can people find that from you?
Yeah, we've got this offering called Lead 52. And the idea is 52 weeks of free leadership learning, right? So there's no cost to it. Our global community of leaders gets an email, takes 5 minutes to read on a Monday, and everyone tries to focus on that simple, small idea during the week. And then at the end of the week, I share some things that people got back to me about. So it's super easy. It's free. It's like a mini MBA over the course of a year, and it's going to be a lot less expensive. So Lead 52 is the initiative.
And I love that it's just a short, digestible thing. And I'll be sure to link it in the show notes so people have easy access to it as well. Okay, one final question that I ask every single one of my guests. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a small business owner?
Oh, I love that question. And the hard part is just getting one, right?
I know.
Because we all got scars of like, well,
right.
a scar, you know? Yeah. But just recently, I interviewed Annie Duke. She has a book out called Quit. And Annie is a former World Series of Poker winner, global. I don't know if it's national or global. But anyway, she got famous by being an expert at poker, but she's turned that into decision making. But we just had a discussion last week about her book, and she said, "There's a saying among elite poker players that poker is one long game." And what she means by that is where poker players get themselves in trouble is on this one night. I'm having a bad night. All right, I got to double down. And I got to double down. And then they just be like, oh, I just blew it all. And poker is one long game. It's your career. Think of poker as your career. All right, so you had a bad night, but that doesn't define you. It's one long game. And I'm finding this applies in so many different ways. Your business is one long game. And yeah, all right, you had a pandemic. Yeah, maybe you had a bad quarter. Yeah, maybe that sales meeting you went to, wow, that really sucked. You know, like we thought this would really work out. It's one long game. And the goal for us in the spirit of this podcast is how do we just keep scaling? Are we making progress? You know? And sometimes I think it's so easy to think that everything rides on that meeting tomorrow and I can't sleep. It's one long game. It's not just tomorrow. It's just a one long game. If we take this mindset that are we at the same place we were a year ago? No, we're making progress. And you know, I was talking to a small business owner just last night, and she's just like 6 months into it. It's like, oh, it's one long game. If we can keep that in mind, it just helps us see that yeah, the stakes are high for everything, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build something for the long term.
I feel like that perspective just like could really reduce your stress level, because yes, you're right. There are big meetings where you're like, oh, this is significant. Like this could be a big game changer for us. But when you look at it like that, you're right. It's like, we might not remember that meeting in 2 years because there's a bigger opportunity or something else that we're focused on. But that perspective really helps like take the pressure off a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah. And maybe we don't overreact like the poker player that ends up making some bad decisions and loses more trying to catch up.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much. There's been so much that we've talked about. And I know that a lot of people probably think project management is super boring. I disagree. I think it's amazing, as evidenced by this amazing podcast that you and I just had. So thank you so much for joining me today. I love this conversation.
True pleasure. Thank you, Jill.